In this tutorial, we're going to go over how to create the drawing for the Titan 93L. Let's first take a look at the Titans of CNC drawing, as this will give us a better understanding of what our drawing will look like. In our upper left-hand corner, we have our front view, and within our front view, we have these section lines dividing our part in half, and we can see that down here from section B to B as our bottom view. If you look closely on our bottom view, we've got this construction circle that makes up the bottom of the exhaust on the bottom of our rocket. And if you look really closely here, we've got this point that we need to be able to reference this end of our arc off of. We're going to create that geometry in a separate sketch, so that way our drawing can reference it. To the right of our front view, we have our right-hand view, and below it we have an isometric view. So let's jump over to Fusion 360 and create this drawing. I already have my Titan 93L up, and the first thing, as I mentioned before, we're going to add in some construction geometry so we can reference this in our drawing. What we're going to do is come over to our browser tab and turn the visibility of our sketches on. And the sketch that we're looking for is the sketch that we use to make up the outside profile of our part. My sketch can be seen here, like so. The geometry that I'm interested in is this circle and then the end point that this line and arc makes up. We're going to be projecting that geometry onto a new sketch so we can further reference it in our drawing. I'm going to turn the visibility of my body back on. And what we want to do to create this new sketch is we're going to turn the visibility of sketch number 1 off, go to Construct, Tangent Plane, and we're going to create a new construction plane that's going to be tangent on this outside of this flange. We're going to turn sketch number 1 back on, and we're going to make it parallel to our previously defined sketch. So we're going to click on the geometry of one of our sketch entities there. And notice when I did this, our sketch kind of flipped to the bottom. We're going to flip this back on the top by setting our angle at 180 degrees. And then press OK. I'm going to turn the visibility of my body off now. And notice now we have our original sketch and we have our new construction plane. I'm going to go P on the keyboard for project. We are going to create our new sketch on this construction plane. And as I mentioned before, the geometry I'm after is this circle and this endpoint right here. Afterwards, in my project pop-up window, I'm going to press OK. And then I'm going to turn the visibility of sketch number 1 off. And now you see those two objects. The issue is in our drawing workspace, Fusion 360 will recognize our projected circle here, but it will not recognize this projected point. So what we're going to do is go to Create and down to Point. We're going to land a point anywhere in our workspace here, and then we're going to add a constraint between that point. We're going to go to Coincident, and we're going to make our new point coincident to our projected point. Afterwards, we're going to finish our sketch, turn our bodies back on, and then turn sketch number 1 back on. What we want to do now is if we look at our view cube, Fusion 360 is currently recognizing this face here as the front of my part. The issue is according to my drawing, this is the front of my part. So what I want to do is I'm going to orient my part around. So I'm going to orbit it a little bit. And I want my original sketch to be on the left-hand side here, like so. And I want this face facing towards me. And I'm going to look at my view cube here, and whatever direction is stated here, I'm going to click on it, left click there, and that will orient my part so it's square in my workspace. After I've done this, I'm going to right click, set my current view as the front. And notice when I do this, my view cube has changed to front. The next thing I'm going to do is turn the visibility of sketch number 1 off, and then I'm going to save my part. We're ready to move on to our drawing workspace, up to our toolbar, down to drawing from design. In our pop-up window here, it's asking, do you want everything in your modeling workspace to be a part of your drawing? We do. We are creating a new drawing here, and the template that we are going to be referencing can be seen in one of my other videos on how to create a title block template. And then press OK. The very first view that Fusion 360 is going to try to land for us is our front view. We're going to change some settings in our pop-up window though. We're going to change its style to visible edges, its scale to 2:1, so it makes it a little bit easier for us to see. We're going to turn full length tangent edges on, and then we're going to turn off thread edges. Once you've entered in all that information, we're going to drag our mouse over to the kind of the upper left hand corner of our sheet, placing this view there. Now that we have this view, we're going to add in a section view to our toolbar, going to drawing views, down to section view. We're going to click on our front view here to reference off of it, and then we're going to gesture our mouse to the center and drag it over to the left, and you should see these green dashed construction lines here. This will enable you to get your section lines perfectly centered. We're going to left click at that location, move to the right of the part, left click again, and press enter on the keyboard. We're going to drag our part down, creating a bottom section view, and then press OK. We're going to go back to drawing views, this time to projected view. Again, we're going to reference our front view. This time we're going to drag our mouse to the right, giving us a right hand view. And then after we left click, we're going to drag it down, giving us an isometric view, and then press enter on your keyboard. We're going to change our isometric view from a wireframe into a shaded with visible edges by double left clicking on it and changing its style to shaded with visible edges. Now that we have our 4 different views landed, we're going to start adding in some dimensions. Let's first take a look at our front view. We're going to add in some diameters here, so we're going to go to dimension, down to diameter dimension. The first dimension we're going to add in is the overall diameter of our part. The next dimension that we're going to add in is the innermost portion of our face groove. The next dimension is the other side of the face groove. The last dimension is the diameter of our chamfer on the end of our threads. One thing I want you to look at now is the measurements that we have just landed here are stated to the 10,000ths column. We want to change the annotations on this, so we're going to move down to the bottom center of our workspace and open up annotation settings and turn display trailing zeros on, and then also change our linear dimension precision to the thousandths column. This is very important depending on the tolerance of your part. Once you've added these dimensions in, you can always realign them as you deem fit. The main thing is you want to make sure that everything is clear so somebody else can read your print very quickly and understand what is going on. This bottom dimension here, we're going to add in a note to it. So we're going to double left click on it, click at the end of the bracket, and we're going to put in X45, and we're going to insert the diameter symbol, or excuse me, the degree symbol. And in front of the bracket, we're going to type in chamfer, because we are going to be chamfering that part. Now that our front view is fully defined, we're going to jump over to our right view. This particular view's got a couple radiuses and a chamfer located on it. So we're going to go D on the keyboard. The radius that we're going to choose here is the one at the bottom of our flange. We're going to left click there. And then we also have this radius right at this location. And we're going to drag that up. Lastly, we're going to change to a text with a leader line. And we're going to reference right off the edge of our part. This one we're going to type in chamfer 0.010 of an inch at 45 degrees. And typical, meaning all the sharp edges will have that if it's not called out. Afterwards, we're going to close that out, and we're going to update this measurement here. We're going to double left click on it, go to the end of the brackets, type in typical 6 times, and close that out, because there are 6 entities that share that measurement. Just like before, we can reorganize our workspace. And you can always reference off of some previous geometry, like so. We're going to move down to our bottom view now. The very first thing that we need to do on our bottom view is we're going to come in and we're going to turn on that construction sketch that we created before we left the modeling workspace. So I'm going to turn on my primary visibility of my sketches. Then I'm going to turn on my last sketch here. And notice by doing that, we have this center point, or the center mark here. And then we also have this circle that makes up the exhaust port of our engine here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in a center line going down the center of our part. We're going to go up to geometry and down to center line. We're going to click on the vertical lines that make up the outside of our flange. Right click and press OK. We're going to click on the center line and grab the grayed out arrowhead. We're going to snap this to the bottom of our part. And we're going to do the same for the top. But the top, we have to make sure that we are snapping it exactly to the top edge. It may take a couple attempts for you to do this. Be very patient with it, as this is very important to get your datum landed correctly. Notice if you zoom in here, your center line should terminate on that top edge. We're going to go to Dimensions and down to Ordinate Dimensions. And we're going to reference that intersection point that we just created. And drag our mouse up. The next location that we're going to reference is this top corner. And drag our mouse over to the side. I'm going to change the way that these measurements are stated by double left clicking on it and changing its primary precision to 0. Now that we have these dimensions in place, we're going to start adding in the remaining balance of our dimensions. So dimensions down to ordinate dimensions. First dimension that we're going to pick up is that center mark. And then we're going to reference off of the extension line off of our previous measurement. We're going to repeat this all the way across our part, referencing off of, again, the previous extension line. And then the outside of our part. Now that we have our horizontal dimensions in place, we're going to add in some vertical dimensions. But first, we're going to put in some center marks on these like radius bosses here. We're going to go to Geometry and down to Center Mark. We're going to reference off this radius here, and that will give us that center mark location. Next, we're going to go back to Ordinate Dimensions. We're going to reference the bottom of our face groove, again referencing our previous extension line. Then this endpoint here from our construction geometry. Then the center marks for these radiuses. Then lastly, the bottom of our part, like so. Looks like I forgot a couple dimensions, that's okay. One thing we're going to do is we're going to add a center mark here for our circle. Because one thing I want to show you is the center of this circle is not at the exact bottom. We're going to go back to Ordinate Dimensions. And it appears like we missed this location here because there is an endpoint on this arc. And then we're going to choose the center location of that circle, like so. We're going to switch over to our regular dimension mode, so D on the keyboard. We're going to give this a dimension. We're going to click on the intersection lines here and then reference off our center line. And we're going to repeat that on all the remaining balance of these two measurements. So the intersection to our center line, like so. I'm going to right click and press OK. Then I'm going to drag these measurements out to a location where I can read them. Now that we have our dimensions here, We're going to add in a couple more dimensions, so D on the keyboard. We're going to click on this, this arc, and it really doesn't matter where you click on the arc, because the arc will share the same measurement the entire way. And we're going to drag that measurement out like so. Then we're going to come in and we're going to reference this hole that's running down the center of our part. I'm going to click on the two vertical lines that make up that hole. And then I'm going to drag that measurement down. While I'm in dimension mode, I'm going to pick this arc right here. That radius there that kind of transitions from the exhaust port into that hole. I'm going to position that right about there. And again, you can move some dimensions around. You want to make sure that your measurements are not all jumbled up on each other. This one we may have to drag this down here. To get it to point correctly at that feature. And with that in mind, I'm going to drag this back up. The next measurement we're going to add in is the diameter of the circle. So D on the keyboard. We're going to click on that diameter, drag that out. And then we're going to click on the vertical edge and the vertical edge of our face groove, and then drag that up. One other dimension that we're going to add is the diameter of this radius boss here. So dimensions down to diameter dimension. This one we're going to drag this out. And I'm going to drag this over to this other diameter dimension here. Kind of get that away. I'm going to right click and press OK to get out of this mode. I'm not very happy with this radius dimension the way that this looks. I'm going to click on it and delete it. I'm going to move this measurement down a little bit. Kind of get that away. And then we're going to add that radius measurement back in. This time we're going to reference off this side. And drag that through. Then over down here. Notice we've got some overlapping dimensions here, so our extension lines are overlapping each other. There's a way that we can kind of do a dimension break. We're going to go up to dimensions and down to dimension break. We're going to click on all the entities that kind of overlap each other. So for example, this one is overlapping this one and that one. And we're going to add a break in, so we're going to press OK. And that will put some segmented lines in there, kind of breaking those off, so it makes it a little bit easier to read and comprehend. Now that we have our dimensions stated, we're going to come up and alter our threads here. We're going to add a text with a leader. We're going to reference kind of in the center here, dragging our mouse up. These are 3/8 16 unified course class 2B threads. There's going to be 350 thousandths minimum of threads. And we're going to enter the GD and T symbol for the depth. One thing that I want to point out is at any point, if your hole diameter here doesn't match up to the print or what the customer is wanting, for example, this 314 is different than the Titans of CNC print. They're actually looking for 312 and 6/10. You could always click on this and then you could delete this measurement and type in your own measurement. While I'm entered into this one, we're going to indicate that this hole goes through the part. And we are going to add in a diameter symbol in front of those brackets. Looks like all of our views are fully defined. We're going to jump down to our title block. We're going to double left click on the lines that make up the title block, and we're going to alter our material annotations, or attributes, sorry. And we're going to type in 6061 T6 aluminum. And then we're going to jump over to our revision block, and this will be revision A. This is a good opportunity. Double check your print and make sure all your views are fully defined. Other than that, this concludes the tutorial on how to create the drawing for the Titan 93L.